Hi. Okay, let's go on and talk about a second, or actually a more general second order nonlinear process called sum and difference frequency mixing. Here, hang on for a second. Very good. So in sum and difference frequency mixing, we have two beams at frequencies omega 1 and omega 2, which are mixed together in a nonlinear crystal. And the question is, what's the output? And what we'll see is that a variety of different frequencies can come out, but one will be at the sum of the two frequencies, and one will be at the difference between them. Now that's kind of interesting. And it's very straightforward. It just comes from the fact that in a second order nonlinear process, we have the electric field squared. So let's imagine now that the electric field then at the crystal is the sum of the term at frequency omega 1 plus the term at frequency omega 2. Of course, the nonlinear polarization will be equal to E0 chi 2 times the electric field squared. But now we have to square the term above. And when we do that, we'll get a series of terms. We have E0 chi 2 times E omega 1 cosine omega 1 times t squared plus E omega 2 cosine omega 2t squared plus the cross terms in the square, which are going to be 2 E omega 1 E omega 2 times cosine omega 1t times cosine omega 2t. Woo, okay? Now, just to be clear, the first two terms here, they look just like the terms we considered before. Each one will give us a second harmonic generation and a DC component. But we don't really care about that. We really care about this third term here, the one that goes like the product of the two electric fields. Okay? Now to simplify this, to interpret it, we just have to remember a trig identity. I'm sure you all remember that cosine of A times cosine of B is equal to 1/2 cosine of A plus B plus cosine of A minus B. There we are. And applying that here, we get the following. So the nonlinear polarization will again include the first two terms, which we're not that interested in. I'll just write them as they were before. And sorry, I'm writing them kind of quickly because at the moment I don't care about them. But of course they're there. And then we have the next term. So we have 2 times 1/2 times E omega 1, E omega 2, cosine of omega 1 plus omega 2 times t, plus E omega 1, E omega 2 times cosine omega 1 minus omega 2 times t. There we are. So the nonlinear polarization then contains a whole bunch of different terms. It contains a term at DC. It contains a term at twice omega 1 and a term at twice omega 2. Those we all knew about. But then it contains these interesting terms. A term at the sum frequency and a term at the difference frequency. Okay, and of course, the polarization components that oscillate at omega 1 plus omega 2 and omega 1 minus omega 2, each of those can produce an electromagnetic wave at those different frequencies. So we can mix together two frequency components and get sum and difference frequency generation. Imagine our crystal here. We have our two beams at omega 1 and omega 2. And at the output, we're going to get terms at omega 1 plus omega 2 and at omega 1 minus omega 2, as well as all the other terms, which I'm ignoring. Okay? Very good. By the way, this process can also be reversed. Where we might have a, well, the process can be used in this way. We could have, for example, a very strong beam at frequency omega 1 and a very weak beam at, let's just call the first one frequency omega, and a very weak beam at some other frequency, we'll call it omega s or signal frequency. And then what we'll get out will consist of the following. We'll have a beam, of course, transmitted radiation at the original frequency, but we can get two other frequencies, which I'll call the signal frequency and the idler frequency, where there's a relationship between these. The original frequency is the sum of the signal frequency and the idler frequency. I know this is a lot to take in at the moment, but then the idler is produced by difference frequency mixing of the signal and the original beam. And the signal beam can be amplified because new radiation will be produced since it's at the difference frequency between the original beam and the idler. Okay? In this process in which the signal beam and the idler beam are amplified by the incident beam is called parametric amplification. Okay? I just thought I'd mention it here. Now, in our case, we're not going to do a general lab on sum and difference frequency mixing, but we'll see that Raman scattering is basically the same process. It's a sum and difference frequency mixing of a light wave and another excitation in the crystal, a vibrational wave at some other frequency. All right, let's stop here and we'll go on to the third process, which you'll see will be a special case of what we just talked about.